In this episode, we will discuss the law and its disparate enforcement upon the black community, which created a school-to-prison pipeline. Welcome to PA Voter Information Network. This is Larry DeMarco, your host. Presidents Reagan and Clinton each took action which built, and if it didn't build, certainly expanded the school-to-prison pipeline in black communities. Shortly after Reagan became president in 1981, he and Nancy Reagan delivered a speech on the war on drugs. Then, driven by the 1986 cocaine overdose of the black basketball star Len Bias, Reagan was able to pass the Anti-Drug Abuse Act through Congress. This legislation appropriated an additional $1.7 billion to fund the war on drugs. Bill Clinton signed a crime bill that he admitted made the school-to-prison pipeline worse. The 1994 omnibus crime bill that Clinton signed included the federal three strikes provision, mandating life sentences for criminals convicted of a violent felony after 2 or more convictions, including drug crimes.
To young people watching or listening, I have a very personal message for you. Say yes to your life. And when it comes to drugs and alcohol, just say no.
In 1982, Nancy Reagan's famous words, "Just say no," were popularized from a speech she gave as President Reagan waged his war on drugs. Nancy was the public face of the Just Say No campaign, making appearances to garner public support for the tough anti-crime and drug policies that later proved to be ineffective. Although the Reagan administration presented the war on drugs as a way to save kids' lives, it became a vehicle that destroyed many lives through mass incarceration. While drug use prevention initiatives such as DARE failed miserably to deter children from using drugs, policies such as zero tolerance and drug-free school zones managed to criminalize young people, especially African Americans. In 1980, nearly 15% of all juvenile drug arrests were black youth. By 1990, black youth constituted nearly 49% of all juvenile drug arrests. Just 8 years after Nancy Reagan's now infamous speech. Over that same time period, the black population in the United States grew from 11.7% to just over 12%. That's an increase of only 3.4% over the decade. The number of black youth that were arrested in that same period grew by over 236.5%. This disparity remains despite the fact that a number of studies have shown that black and white youth participate in drug use and sale at just about the same rate. In 1986, 4 years after Nancy Reagan's Just Say No speech, Congress passed the Drug-Free Schools and Communities Act, mandating a zero-tolerance policy for drugs or alcohol on public school grounds. After the law was passed, the incarceration rate of juveniles continued to balloon. From 1986 to 1996, white juveniles sent to prison for drug offenses doubled. However, young blacks incarcerated for drug offenses grew 6-fold. By 1996, black youth were 3 times more likely than white juveniles to get sent to prison for drug offenses. Along with the dramatically increased incarceration rates, school suspensions also increased. Fewer than 4% of students were being kept out of school as a punishment in the 1970s. Suspension rates for all students has nearly doubled from 3.7% in 1973 to 6.9% in 2006. With the advent of zero tolerance, black children experienced a 150% increase in suspension rates, from 6% in 1973 to 15% in 2006. Meanwhile, the white suspension rate gained less than 50% increase, growing from 3.1% to 4.8%. The suspension rate gap between blacks and whites has grown from 3 percentage points in the 70s to over 10 percentage points in the 2000s. In other words, black students are now over 3 times more likely to be suspended than white students. President Reagan's failed policy to sway children away from drug addiction became a pathway to suspension and ultimately prison. Nationally, the United States is incarcerating youth at a rate that is almost 5 times greater than that of South Africa, the country with the next highest youth incarceration rate. The United States youth incarceration rate is 7 times greater than that of the UK, 14 times greater than Germany's, and over 3,000 times greater than Japan's. Over 2 decades after Nancy's Just Say No declaration, African Americans continue to feel the disproportionate ramifications of the war on drugs, representing 26% of juvenile arrests, 44% of youth who are detained, 46% of youth who are judicially waived to criminal court, and 58% of the youth admitted to state prisons. So the next time we hear the war on drugs, we'll remember that there's a school-to-prison pipeline, and we'll say,
Just say no.
There's a two-part problem here. Not only was there a disproportionate application of the law against blacks and black children, the laws were written to crack down on poor minority communities. For instance, according to the ACLU, there is a 100-to-1 crack versus powder cocaine sentencing disparity under which distribution of just 5 grams of crack carries a minimum of 5 years prison sentence, while distribution of 500 grams of powder cocaine carries that same 5-year mandatory minimum sentence.
The kinds of kids that are called super predatory.
3 strikes and you are out.
It was an enormous burden on the black community, but it also violated a sense of core fairness.
Ava DuVernay discusses the influence of the law and mass incarceration with Democracy Now!
One of the things that most struck me in the film is as you deal with the policies of each president since Nixon, you then show the growth of the prison population as a result of those policies. And some of the most astounding growth, of course, occurred under Bill Clinton in the period of Bill Clinton.
Yes, we start the film off with statistics that are given by Obama, and we go back through Nixon, through Reagan, through Bush 1, and through Clinton. Those are really the years where the boom happened, where we started to, the architecture was laid, the foundation was laid for the current problem. And so we really delved into those presidencies and really examined what each administration did to get us to where we are now. Surprisingly, we had some criticism for including the Clintons there, but ultimately everyone did what they did. And so we just have to recount what that was so that we understand where we are going forward, which is to a scary place, I think.
Private prisons played a key role. The Luzerne County Kids for Cash scandal revealed an enormous problem that private prisons cause. Judges or politicians with financial ties to prisons are more likely to imprison children who have criminal law issues in the county. And in Delaware County, Councilman Brian Zidek uncovered a problem for a private prison contractor who is a heavy political donor to the Law and Order political party. At a forum, he discussed the following regarding the George Hill Correctional Facility in Delaware County.
And if you've ever read an annual report filed with the SEC, you'll note that there's a section where they talk about the risks to their business. With the GEO Group, they talk about factors that could cause actual results to differ materially from those expressed or implied by the forward-looking statements in this report. And one of them is our ability to maintain or increase occupancy rates at our facilities. So their investors know, hey, this is a risk to us making money. If we can't keep these jails and prisons filled, we might not make as much money.
The states were required to keep these prisons filled, even if nobody was committing a crime.
It's so difficult to talk about mass incarceration because it has become heavily monetized.
The focus is on taking people from prison, putting them in community corrections, parole and probation.
How much progress is it really if now there's a private company making money off the GPS monitor?
A prison system should not be placed in a conflict of interest between profit and the quality of life of citizens. Where a corporation has a fiduciary duty to shareholders and not the interest of prisoners, there is a huge danger for civil rights violations. This has been part 4 of a 5-part series where we have discussed the law, its unequal application, and the school-to-prison pipeline of the black community. In the next episode, we will explore why everyone in society should be concerned, even if you're not a minority. If you like this episode, please subscribe to PA Voter Information Network. Click the like button, forward this link to all the people on your contact list and social media friends, and leave a comment below to start a discussion. Signing off. Tune in next time. Bye for now.